everybody, and welcome to Tavern Talks podcast. I do apologize for the little longer than normal starting delay that we had before the podcast tonight. My dog decided to have an accident right as we were going live, and I didn't want to leave that for a couple hours. I do see that Al, my bum fluff, just raided with a party of 4 right here near the start of the podcast. Thank you so much, Al, my bum fluff, for raiding over. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a shout out. I hope your stream went great. I was on there a little bit playing Phasmophobia earlier. Al my bumfluff is a wonderful streamer. So if you're into watching games like ESO and other things they stream, please be sure to check them out. Just trying to take a look at everybody else. Steve Ray also rated in with a party of 13. I'm so sorry I missed Steve. I love you to death. You are wonderful human being, mostly doing ESO, but other games. Sorry I missed your raids, and sorry that we are getting started late with the podcast today. Like I said, my pup had a little bit of an accident. So we had to take care of that. Normally we would be a little less disjointed here at the start. So welcome everybody to Tavern Talks. Tavern Talks is a podcast that I host every so often. We're getting on a cadence. We're going to be doing it every other Saturday. However, for this month, we're doing back-to-back Saturdays. Tavern Talks is a podcast dealing with basically all things nerdy. Right now, we've started our podcast with a series on LARPs, very much focusing on a LARP known as Amtgard, but we cover a lot of different LARPs and things like that here. So we will eventually be doing things about Dungeons and Dragons, Elder Scrolls Online, anything kind of in the same kind of overall vein of this. Tonight on Tavern Talks, we have a couple different guests with us. We'll be talking to Killian from the Pacific Northwest, from the state of Washington here in the United States. Killian has participated in over a dozen, I want to say, LARPs. So they're kind of a good authority on the differences and the nuances you get with the different LARPs out there. So we're going to be talking to Killian kind of not just about Amtgard, but like how Amtgard, which is a little more combat heavy, compares to a truly immersive, always in character LARP, and kind of just like getting their feedback on things like that. In addition to Killian, from Amtgard, we have DeVry and Kim Jin Jong, the illest, the best bard, the voice of the Northwest. Both of them have been part of Amtgard for, I believe, both have been part of it for over a decade. What we're talking about with them is basically the grind, the pathway from joining a LARP, getting heavily involved with the LARP, helping your kingdom grow, and honestly working towards like the pinnacle in Amtgard is masterhood. And they're both nearing that masterhood. So they have that unique take on both what it takes to get to masterhood and going up that path, but not, they're still fresh in it. They're a player on the field. Like I've been a knight in our LARP for a while. So my perspective, being a knight since 2001, is going to be different than like, I'm like a sports analyst almost, in terms of it's been so far removed since I've had to go and earn and achieve something like a knighthood, and where both of them are in the thick of it now. Like they're star players nearing that Super Bowl ring, to use an American phrase. So we have the order we're going to kind of go in tonight. We will definitely be starting with Killian, just to kind of set the stage for the podcast and things like that. What you need to do, so you know, is like I can't answer all questions as they come through chat. However, we will pay close attention. However, at the end of each segment, we will do a Q&A. So if you can hold your questions until then, there's a much better chance that we'll be able to see them and get them answered by the guests or by myself and things like that. And then depending on when the podcast gets over, we will probably switch from podcast mode to marbles mode just a little bit, because at 8 o'clock, we're actually going to be continuing to support the arts by raiding over to Belnorn, who is doing a beer tasting. So I know we just got off of one hold. I need to just do another really quick 30-second hold just to make sure everything is up and running. So we're going to be on a BRB screen, but it's going to be for less than a minute. And I appreciate all of you bearing with us for this little bit of a rocky start, thanks to my puppers.
I'm there if you're there.
Here we are, back to it. And we're our first guest this evening on Tavern Talks is Killian. Um, Killian doesn't have really a webcam setup, but we have a nice photo of Killian there for y'all to see. So let's go ahead and start off, Killian. As I mentioned at the start in my like kind of preamble, you've been doing a variety of LARPs, and by variety I mean if not a dozen, close to a dozen, possibly more for years now. So let's just start off. Let's tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Like what actually got you into not Amtgard specifically, but LARPing in general. Hey, can you pause for just a second? I'm not sure. I don't see the audio bar going up. I don't think that you are actually coming through um the podcast. I don't think that your voice is actually going live. If somebody in chat can let me know if you actually hear Killian, that would be great because in OBS I don't actually see your voice bar. So I want to make sure that people can hear you. Okay, they can't hear you. So let me adjust. I have been having weird issues with um with Discord lately, so I'm yeah, you should be coming through just fine. Um so let me try something else real quick. I do apologize. Uh we've had not a great start here, but we'll be on track in just a second. So let me audio output capture. Let's just all right, let's try that again. Killian, are you with us?
I'm here. Does anybody else hear me?
I feel like I see your stuff going through now. I feel like
Awesome.
Phasmophobia summoning a ghost. Medzik blames the shadow demon. Hey, Out My Bumfuck,
Awesome.
Thank you so much for that subscription. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. And Steve, that was so kind of you. Thank you so much for the gifted sub to the channel. Both of you, that's really amazing and completely generous. And if Jose UK 86, please thank Steve for that wonderful. And thank you all for joining the Loctopus party. Okay, we should be fine now. I don't know what happens, but every once in a while, Discord just seems to be automatically converting to a different input device, but we're good now. So
Discord's a jerk. Like it wants to just pick up whatever it wants to pick up, and it's like the worst boyfriend ever. It just kind of leaves and doesn't call back, and then you have to like remind it that hey, you got a date. Let's you got to be here.
So instead of answering my question, for the sake of podcast audio and my own editing skills, I'm going to we're gonna run that back. So everybody in chat, just bear with us for 2 minutes. I'm gonna run it back. So just because it'll be easier for putting this out as a podcast. So welcome everybody. Thank you this evening for joining us at the Loctopus Tavern. Go ahead and hang up your satchels, you ramblers and you gamblers, you warriors and you wizards. Tonight in Tavern Talks podcast, we are going to be talking with Killian, somebody who's played, if not a dozen, well over a dozen different live action role-playing games, from games that are based purely on reenactment to ones where you are immersed in a fantasy world and you never come out of character. We're also going to be talking with Kim Jin Jong, the Illest, and DeVry, who are people who are not quite masters of their skills and trades just yet. They're not quite knights, but both of them are nearing that accolade. So they're both they know both the journey to get there and what they aspire to be. And I believe that gives a fresher take than someone such as myself, who's been a knight within our LARP for, going on 2 decades now. To start off, we are joined by Killian. And if Killian, like I just mentioned, you've been part of, a dozen plus, maybe just not quite a dozen different LARPs. So I think the best thing to start with for everybody listening is go ahead and let them know, like, what made you get into live action role playing in the first place.
I just stopped counting on which LARPs or how many LARPs I've been participating in. Like I just don't bother counting because each experience, each LARP is a little bit different. So maybe I'll come up with an idea of how many it was. But um, I just like most of your probably a lot of your listeners. Like I started role playing when I was very very young, and then I got involved in like a role playing group in high school where I met a whole bunch of like minded people, and these guys were participating in something called um, so they were going to a game called Legacies. It's a kind of a runoff game from Nero, or what was Nero, now Alliance, and now Refuge, and a few other games. But I didn't even go to that one quite yet. That wasn't my first one. I ended up going and using like my time at Vampire Parlor LARPs, or Vampire the Masquerade, the Mind's Eye Theater system. And I got really involved in that. Then I finally made it out to Legacies, and about the same time I went out to my first games at Amtgard, like in 2000, 99, 2001. This was a long time ago. And then spent almost exclusively my time just at Legacies for like 6 years before I branched out and went to other games and found that ended up really enjoying the different parts of live action role playing and the role playing experiences you can get from different games and different organizations.
And just for people who are listening who might not know, when you say Mind's Eye Theater and Vampire, that's very much the same Vampire the Masquerade, like coming out of the new Vampire Bloodlines game, right?
Similar to that, yeah. Vampire the Bloodlines is a really some people really like that game. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it, but it's enjoyable for a lot of people, and that's fantastic. It's set in the same game world, the game universe. It's called the World of Darkness, and that's been around since like I guess the early '90s or so. And yeah, it's the same universe. In that LARP system, that Mind's Eye Theater system, in the first couple of chapters of the book, they have of the rule book, they have a very serious no touching, no weapon props, nothing. They were really worried about that kind of I would assume litigation. I don't know. It was never an issue with anybody that I played with, but yeah. So there was a much more role play. Dress up and you want to be your character as much as possible. But they did their combat resolution or the conflict resolution, instead of using dice, they would use rock paper scissors, and they had a whole intricate system for that, which I found was fun at the time. But I moved away from that pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then kind of moving on, because our primary focus for kind of our talks going forward is Amtgard, and I believe the other one we're going to talk about is either going to be Alliance or Legacies.
I'd like to also, breach into Shadow Accord as well.
Shadow Accord, yes.
Yeah.
Shadow Accord, any of those. And just
Sure.
to give like kind of an overview for the audience, Amtgard falls in kind of the same category as other games like Belgarath or Daga here, and that the gameplay, at least to me, is similar to like a World of Warcraft or even a League of Legends. You're not always in character. And then the other one we're talking about, Shadow Accord, this evening, that is an immersive LARP. So when people go to that one, once the game starts and you're in character, other than like very specific real life situations where you need to be out of character, you never drop character. And so that's what we're kind of comparing, is like this more battle heavy, light role play, but more action oriented live action role playing games, versus say Shadow Cord, which is very immersive. It has its own combat, its own skills and things, but it also never, like, you are the same character, kind of like closer to like a D&D session.
I'll go ahead and jump in there and say, like, so Amtgard is much more of that sport. I always viewed Amtgard, whereas it has a lot of opportunities for weekend-long events where you're your character. Baelnorn does this really great event, and the name is totally escaping me, but I remember going Shattered Kingdoms, and it was an awesome potential for a great role-play event where using the Amtgard as a backdrop of a system. Had a hard time getting into character for that because nobody was staying in character, which is totally fine because Amtgard doesn't really have that as a good backdrop. And then you go into games like Legacies, and we'll use Alliance as well, even though Alliance is kind of up in the air right now. And there's over on the West Coast, we've got, instead of Alliance, now we have Refuge. It's kind of had a name change and some IP stuff, but that's not for this discussion. And where you could go and spend a lot of your time in game, but a lot of the time that you'd be spending during your time at a game like Alliance or Legacies, a lot of it would be out of game to resolve issues, like while you're waiting to go on a module or something like that. But while you're interacting with other players, you're in character. Shadow Accord, we are very similar to Alliance and Refuge in that regard, where we're asking everybody to attempt to stay in character as much as possible. And if and or when you're ever not in character, like, there's plenty of reasons why you're not going to be in bath, or like not going to be in character. Going to the bathroom, if you have a rules question, going down to see the storyteller team, or if you need to go outside, go out to the parking lot, because we have a strict no smoking on the campgrounds policy type of thing. So if you're going out and smoking or something like that, and of course, not nobody's like a jerk about it. So if you're like, you drop characters your first game, you're just having a hard time like keeping up. Like, I haven't been in terribly too many situations where, especially in the last 10 years of playing this game, where somebody hasn't, like, they admit like, hey, I'm having a hard time staying in character. People will be like, it's fine. You just don't reference the outside world. Don't reference, your real name. Use your character name and just kind of go with the flow. It's a lot easier than a lot of other people think.
Yeah, so to kind of walk the walk people through who may not have been to one or the other, or maybe never been to a live action role playing game ever. You don't have to take a lot of time with it. Let's start with Amtgard. Can you walk through like the average, let's compare events, because in Amtgard we have week to week practices, but like let's compare like kind of like the average experience going to an Amtgard camp out, not a Shattered Keenest, but like, your more standard Amtgard camp out.
Sure, yeah. Most of the campouts that I've noticed are either big events for divvying up the times in between, like somebody's getting elected, or there's a celebration of somebody getting elected, the coronation events, and then in between those that you have for like the artistic, the ANS, and then competitions. So during that, you're gonna, like, for an Amtgard event, you're gonna show up there. One of the nice things is, for most Amtgard events, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest, they start Thursday night and go till Sunday afternoon. And effectively, you're showing up and you're getting your camp set up, you're getting your tent set up, you're going to find your cabin if you've got cabins, hopefully, or you're going out to your hotel room, as some of us get a little bit older in our time.
Yeah,
looking forward to that, because that's on my next up on the old elder LARP LARPer schedule.
I'm at that elder LARPer schedule. If there is a nearby hotel, that is where I'm staying until I get myself a yurt belt. But I'm sleeping in a bed. No more hard grounds for me.
Yeah, I'm getting kind of tired of camping with or bringing all that stuff. But you get that stuff set up. You go and have yourself, like, if you're the type of person who likes to drink, or in it's legal where you are, because most of the time we're using like state camps or whatnot. Make sure you have your libations for the evening. You go around, chit chat, figure out your schedule, go meet up with friends, because you generally probably don't see these people once, but like 3 or 4 times a year. So you go with your fighter company, your nightly family, and you go and chill. You go figure out if you're going to be any tournaments. You go put your stuff ready, get ready for the Dragon Master or the Arts and Sciences. You go get on the ditch field. You like the next day on Friday and then Saturday. It's either competitions heavy or battle game heavy. And those competitions can be anything from like actual sword fighting competitions, archery competitions, arts and sciences competitions, bardic competitions. There we go. Or they're battle games, which everybody kind of blows out. Goes for the walls when they're doing battle games out here, because some people just grab a good team. They go do Phoenix League stuff, which I think so.
Let's
cool.
Just interject real quick. Doing a great job covering the event, but I really want to, again, to make sure everybody understands. If you had to liken it, I've always likened it to a match of League of Legends, or maybe a battleground in an MMO. Is there like a different thing you would liken to? So for somebody who hasn't been to Amtgard, what would you liken the battle game to? Not like the specific abilities and how it goes, but like if someone was watching it as a video game, what sort of game? Paintball?
It's paintball. It's an aggressive sport of paintball, like indoor league paintball. A lot of the battle games are where you have 2 teams and they're going up against each other, and you consciously have an objective, but you can also win. Not always in Amtgard and not always in paintball or airsoft, but you can also win by just killing the team. And since we have that whole super good combat resolution in Amtgard, like, you just kill off your team and go lazily back to go get the objectives. Some of the better games, in my opinion, I'm going to go ahead and throw out the term better, don't rely on killing off the opponents as much as one team or another actively doing objectives, and I think those are really great. But that's a matter of design. So long as people are having fun, whatever.
But yeah, so basically at the end of the day, you got your 2 different teams, sometimes 3, but for the most part 2 different teams with their abilities and their classes, and they're going at it towards either an objective, and sometimes an objective could be eliminate. So another thing I think I would liken it to, taking your paintball reference a step further, is like Overwatch or Valorant sort of shooters, less like Call of Duty, but
Yeah,
more like those ones where you have special abilities on cooldowns, and your team composition needs to have like tanks, healers, damage doers, and things like that.
it's less coordinated, I think, than even
Well,
most of the time that I've seen. It's less coordinated than like ever Overwatch, which is a fantastically well balanced system
what
done
I'm
by
saying,
super professionals.
yeah,
But
I'm not trying to get into the weeds with it. What I'm just trying to give like, I like to give like reference points. Is tabletop game analogy. Camp Medzik points out Amtgard is kind of like Warhammer, like if you do tabletop miniatures, look more like Warhammer than
yeah, yeah.
like D&D. So and this kind of keep moving on. So like you said, Amtgard, you're going to go to, you have your arts and sciences competitions at night. You're doing bardics by the fire, hanging out with friends. And then when the games come up, that's when you're geared up and doing the games. And then you have like courts and like kind of that mixture. But like there's a lot of time spent socializing with your friends at the event where you're not in character. And now that's obviously quite a bit different. So like if you're all geared up, you're kitted out, and you're ready to go to Shadow Court, kind of like take us through like the overall, like what's it like to go to Shadow Court?
So a lot of the LARPs are set up. They have a schedule almost, if not almost, then exactly this style of going. Having been on a plot team in Legacies for many years, storyteller at Shadow Court for many years, effectively being the dungeon master or the game master for games, all over the place. If not helping out with volunteering as a non-player character or a member of the organization that would help out otherwise, I've noticed that most LARPs and have a really great thematic thematic time and schedule for the time that usually we are allotted for that weekend. Usually you'll start off on Friday evening as opposed to Thursday, and then kind of have fun on Friday. You'll go all Friday evening, all day Saturday, and maybe depending on the game, you'll have some interactions and some stories and some actual stuff happening until midday on Sunday. Usually depending on when you're supposed to be getting out of the campsite. What you'll do is you'll end up showing up, and like you'll get some story interaction, you'll get some light combat on Friday. You'll meet up with your group, your faction, your team, your in-game family, and decide what your objectives are for the weekend. If they're role play objectives, then you have to, you can do that, or you can just go chill out in the tavern. That's totally fine. You can wait for a story to come to you. You can go find out story. Usually if you're in a long game like Shadow Accord and you've got a character that's got a lot of connections with a lot of the stories going on, usually you've got friends working on stuff, so it's a lot more like the role play oriented objectives, as it were, if you want to boil it down to that, and trying to get like some of the problems solved, because most of these games are centered around drama or conflict, and you want to resolve that conflict or perpetuate this conflict. It's however you set up your character and how the role play in the game is set up to do that. And you'll go through Friday night.
And that conflict, when you're talking about conflict and objectives, unlike Amtgard, like where the game organizer goes, this is the objective, let's split the teams as equally as we can, or choose your own teams with this number of people. When you're talking about drama and conflict in Shadow Accord, because you're building a character over months and years and stuff going, those are like what your character's objectives are. Like you're kind of self-setting your objectives amidst whatever plot has set as the story. Is that right?
So yeah, going back on another analogy, you have an overall level in Amtgard to a degree, and then you can also level up your own classes, and then you have objectives in that game, that battle game. Whereas in Shadow Accord, you have one or two characters, sometimes 3 or 4, but like you're only playing one character, and it has its own story, it has its own background, it has its own loot pile, it has its own equipment. Hopefully, it has its own garb and armor and weapons. Some of it can be interchangeable.
And if that character dies, I mean, outside of the game itself has a resurrection system. If the character dies, they're basically dead, like a D&D session. Like there might be a way to come back, but if you die, you're dead.
Most games have some sort of resurrection system, or at the very least, like a healing system. Shadow Court has a couple of wiggle room areas because we are set using the World of Darkness as an inspiration. Most games have like dude lost his character, he'd been playing it for 15 years. Let's do this super long ritual type thing to go and bring back that character so he doesn't lose part of that guy's identity. Because to be quite frank, you do become that person after a while. It's like method acting, except for 15 years. So
yeah,
so there's a lot to that. Sorry, there's a lot of baggage in that one.
No, I understand there's a lot of baggage to that. So like with the first game Amtgard, like we mentioned, like there's a lot of time that you're out of character unless it's a very specific quest, scenario, or court. There's your character is more of a skin, kind of like an MMO in Amtgard in a lot of ways. With Shadow Accord, and other immersive LARPs, you're basically in character the whole time, right? From game stop to game end, aside from like I'm taking a shower or there's a medical, like, barring
Yeah,
like an
yeah.
IRL reason to step away, right?
Yeah, I think there's a way to phrase it. I think that's a little better. Is we want to encourage you to be in game
Okay.
as all times.
Right, right. It's not a requirement. I'm just saying like the average player is probably in character 90+% of the time
When,
versus
when you're walking from the tavern to one of the other buildings, or you're going to go find somebody, you're not going to like if you catch some people on the side of the road that's having like they're having a conversation, they're like 99% of the time they're going to be having a conversation that's going to be in game. If they're going to be having an out of game conversation, they'll switch. Chances are they'll switch it to an in-game conversation to make sure that they're not breaking your immersion. They're not breaking your suspension of disbelief for being in a campsite in Western Washington where we're all pretending to be vampires, werewolves, and ghosts out in the medieval village in England.
So I think that's the best phrase for it, because I said immersive life, but yeah, immersion. At Shadow Court, you can expect a lot more immersion, whereas Amtgard's about getting together with your friends to play this kind of sport, this game, and enjoy these arts competitions and bardics and things like this. Whereas like when you go to Shadow Court, it's about the immersion, other than maybe if you're like off to the side to have a private conversation, like you said, to the point that if you were having a private conversation or a conversation that was not in game, you'd switch it in game momentarily just to help each other's immersion along.
Yeah, and you'll find a lot of the games out here I can mainly attest to the Pacific Northwest, but if you're going to games like Oz, Alliance, Legacies, and I would even go so far. I'll go ahead and speak for like Gothic and Eldritch and a few of the other games. I haven't attended a couple of these ones. I would go so far as to even say Dystopia Rising, even though I've not attended that one specifically. That they're all very much you're in character. If you're walking down the road, those people are going to be in character unless they are doing something specifically that says they're out of game. Most games have like a headband that you have to wear around your forehead, or you have like a hand signal, or you're putting weapons on your head. I've just straight up told people to start adopting that from Amtgard. Like when you're dead, you put your weapon on your head, and when you're out of game, that's your symbol too for most of the LARPs out here. And people understand that like you're to ignore them. Not that you're trying to be rude to your friend who just went and played a skeleton. You just had to beat up because he was going to go beat up the peasantry or something like that. But like because you're focusing on the in-game situation. You put your head on your weapon on your head, and you just walk with your head down. You try not to get involved in things. You don't get involved in conversations, and it helps the people who are still participating in the game to actively participate in the game world. Whereas in Amtgard, I have to tell people like, hey, dead people don't talk when I'm in the middle of a battle game.
That's perfectly fair. And just for the sake, because people who rated it earlier, Al My Bumfluff, C420, people like that, they're actually not in America. And since you are kind of an encyclopedia when it comes to LARPs, we don't have to get into the weeds with it, but do you have like a couple LARPs over there if they're interested? Because on the screen right now for people watching, and just so people know, you can find out about Amtgard at amtgard.com. AMTGARD is how you spell Amtgard. And then shadowaccord.nwlarpers.org for that game. But if people were, say, in the UK, over in Europe looking for a game, do you know any games that are similar to either of those or different style LARPs over there that those people can maybe look into?
So first things first. I'm going to go ahead and pimp out this organization that I go with that I work with. Big air quotes here. That I've been going with when I go up to another game called Bicolin, up in Quebec, Canada. I work with LARPing.org. Like I'm not an employee. I use work as like I go and help them out when we go up to Bicolin, and I've been going with these guys for like 5, 6, 7 years now, and they're fantastic people. Love working with them. But if you go to their website, larping.org, and they have an atlas there, you can find an area where you want to go. Simple Google searches will come up with a lot of really good stuff, especially since we're all in the time of COVID. A lot of people have had time to focus on their web presence for their web page or for their LARPs, and a lot of people are either cramping down and just like, no, we're not going to worry about anything for our game, or they're putting some fun, some fine polish on some websites. I've seen some good things. I know that there's and I strongly suggest this for anybody who's interested or is LARPing to any degree, whether it's the diehard Dago Here players and Amtgard players, or the super robust role players from any of the other games that I play in, or any of those like blockbuster like super LARPs. There is a documentary called Treasure Trapped, and it documents some of the English origins of LARPing, as opposed to the SDA style, foam weapon fighting that we had out here that evolved into stuff like Dagger Hero, Belgarth, and then Amtgard, and then all the rest of them. Like, they had LARPing done, started in from a different area. It's like a 2-hour-long documentary that kind of goes into the whole where like some D&D nerds started playing D&D effectively out of a castle, like in northern England, and not only that, but it's just a fun video to watch.
So
like,
it's fun. Yeah, that's really great. I did, for those who are watching, but for those who aren't watching and just listening or will be listening at home, just to cover that again, LARPing, LARPing.org is really going to be a site you can use to find a lot of these different LARPs. And just to stay on topic for the purpose of this conversation, we talked about, people can already kind of start, I think, to compare and contrast the two games and how they're a little bit different in style, how like the sport like LARP versus the immersive LARP is different. But I always like to focus on the positive here on the channel and on the show. So like, let's go with each one. We'll start with Amtgard. Like, let's talk about like what are the perks? Like, if these are the things you're into, you'd probably like Amtgard for your LARP, and then we'll flip over to Shadowcard and go, if you're into these things, this might be the better type of LARP for you to check out.
So I always really like to promote Amtgard for 3 different reasons specifically, and I'll get the easy one out of the way. It's the fighting. The fighting is some of the cleanest, most effective and essential fighting that you'll find in any other LARP that I've ever been to, like up to and including like Biko. When you do the straight fighting, the battle gaming, that's actually not part of what I'm going to go into, because it's a totally different beast of a thing. If you want also something else from Amtgard, their arts and sciences. Our Serpent Knights are people who make the garb, and our leather workers and our metal workers and the people who work with all sorts of other materials. Some of the best artisans I've ever seen in my life, and I stock some of these other pages too. That isn't to say that games like the SCA and other games don't have their shining people, but Amtgard has a which transitioned to my third reason why I would suggest going to Amtgard for another one. Amtgard has some of the best ways to recognize people. Our award tier is set up to be fantastic. And when properly used, it's not always properly used, and that's okay, because every game has, or every park, every kingdom, every big event has their own foibles, and it's perfectly fine. But our recognition system, our award system is bar none like some of the best award system, best levels of recognition that I've ever seen for any organization. So that's Amtgard.
If you're going to flip over now to Shadow Accord, I know there's a lot of different immersive ones, but I think we've talked the most about that. So let's talk about like immersive ones, but also Shadow Accord kind of specifically.
I'll use Shadow Accord as kind of a backdrop, but it encompasses a lot of other things other than that what Amtgard doesn't cover. Amtgard does not, even though we have really fantastic artisans at Amtgard, they tend to not outfit their entire park. There have been some shining examples of that, which is awesome. But when you go to a game like Shadow Accord and other LARPs that are like it, not to take any fire away from any other LARPs, their garb per person tends to be tremendously higher and better quality than what you'll ever find any of the stick wacky job fighting parks like Amtgard, Dag, and Bell. The garb that I break out to go to a simple like Alliance or Shadow Accord event, even my simplest garb tends to be better than your like your tunic. Like I get a tabard, or I get a full tunic. I make sure my shirt, if it's not like a sports shirt or something like that, to keep the sweat off of me or keep it moving or whatnot, or if it's not like for a super cold event, then it's another garb shirt underneath it. My pants are fighter pants, usually from Amtgard actually. I've got armor, I've got leather belts, I've got my gloves are all taken care of. They're not my sport gloves that I use for Amtgard, but they're leather gloves. I'm also not getting beat up nearly as much as I am at Amtgard, so there's a lot of safety about that. You don't see people with sunglasses unless they're like prescription. Like I wear glasses, and I've got some other things, which is totally fine. I'm not taking like somebody's got medical things. It's cool, but the level of garb is going to be per person generally a lot better at games like Shadow Accord.
All right.
Roleplay, for example, also like is going to be bar none probably 100% better. You will find actual interaction based on in-character interactions. You don't really see that in other games like Amtgard and Dag and Bell, like virtually at all. But you will. That's the focus of those games, and they tend to just be kind of fantastic.
Awesome. So to kind of just sum it up, if you are looking for a LARP where you can take weapons, foam weapons, kind of go out without having to put a lot of extra work into your initial kicks, you can start playing without kidding yourself out, and you're really looking for like that quick Twitch style fast action combat, and an like a very robust crafting system where you can like level up a path towards mastery and get recognized for arts and sciences, service, politics, or fighting. Amtgard's kind of like a really good starting point if you haven't LARP before. But if what you're looking for is that live action version of your Vampire the Masquerade game, D&D, you're looking to like write out an immersive backstory. You're looking to kit yourself out from day one the best you can and really just start building a character and really focus on like the story of that character from the minute they step into the game till they take their last breath. Then something like Shadow Accord is probably going to be where someone would want to start out.
I mostly agree with that, but I want to make sure that I'm not pushing anybody away from the other games.
No.
If you go to one of these games, if you go to like a Facebook of Shadow Accord, you go to Facebook of Refuge or Alliance, and I'm pretty sure any of the other games in the Pacific Northwest or all across the world, and you say, hey, I want to look as good as you guys out here. How do I get, where do I get started? You're going to have to spend some money, and that's just kind of understanding. Like, unless you got people ready to gift you things, which would be super awesome, and some games are ready to be like, hey, I got some stuff you can have for the weekend to see if this is your thing before you sink in like $100 on just some basic garb. You're going to find that level of people who are going to go out of their way to make sure the newbies and the new players are A, feeling welcome, and B, feeling like they can get involved.
Right. I didn't mean to imply one had to invest a ton. I just meant that, like, if your purpose was to step into a character from day one and live that character's life, you're looking more at an immersive LARP. Whereas if your big interest is, I want to go smash people with foam weapons, or I really want to get into learning and making arts and crafts, Amtgard might be better. But I mean, Amtgard has, like you said, Shattered Kingdoms. It has, like, in chat, Kinjin said, Amtgard's heavy on the LA of LARP, the live action, and Shadow Accord would be higher on the RP side of LARP, the role playing side. But at the end of the day, you're going to get fighting and that sort of interaction in those intense moments at an immersive LARP. And you are going to get those role play elements at like Amtgard at that more heavy live action. It's just the slider scales on the audio slider scales are a bit different depending on which one you're looking at.
I would say, like, just to kind of be not argumentative, but to bring up another point, like, if I go to a weekend at, let's say, Alliance or now Refuge, and I go up against one of their NPCs, it's Saturday night. It's the big push for their story end. I get some like scrappy 25-year-old kid who comes at me with like Florentine weapons, and anybody who's a fighter knows that Florentine requires just a bajillion levels of calories. But like, they come at me and they're given 100% to come and bring my character down. And to be quite fair, I've been fighting like 2 or 3 times at that event so far, where it's been like 10-minute protracted wacky bat fights. Whereas in Amtgard, like, if I get tired, I just walk off the field. Alliance, I don't get the opportunity. That 25-year-old kid who was fighting me on Saturday night has been fighting since he got there on Friday afternoon, and has not stopped. Some of the intensity of the fight of these games can be very, very just amazing to be a part of, because the level of intensity that you can ditch all day long, but like, these people out there, man, they waste. My ass is on the ground like halfway through an event if I have to even put half what the NPCs can, and that's like and that means I can ditch all day long at Amtgard. I don't, but I kill right, because I'm getting old and lazy and fat. But like I want to make sure that like if you're looking for wacky bats, you can still go there and still have a lot of fun.
Right, and like again, that's what I was saying is you will find everything at both LARPs. I was just again
absolutely
just saying because I know I've talked to different people. If they're sitting and daydreaming about going to their first LARP, and all they're thinking about is this 8-page backstory they wrote for their character and living that character's life,
chances are that
you're
person's going to be a lot more fun at or using that stuff at a game like Alliance. Yeah.
Right. But if they were the sort of kid like me who grew up going to the backyard with their friends with their plastic, like He-Man and Thundercats and She-Ra swords, and what they've been dreaming about is finding other people that they can strap on armor and swing swords at or throw fireballs at, they're probably might want to take their first steps on a field over at something like an Amtgard.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm of the opinion try both, but obviously,
I encourage people to try both, but at the same time, I want to make sure people know. And so, just because we want to make sure we have some time, I did have a couple questions that came through Discord to me. If anybody else who is with us on Twitch right now has any questions for me, for Mike, or for Killian, or for both of us, go ahead and put them in chat. But to start with the questions we got from Discord. Is if I wanted to go to an immersive LARP, I'm kind of paraphrasing parts, and participate, but I wasn't sure about the character part, is there an option for me to go and be an NPC?
Most games have that as an option. The only game that I know of that doesn't have that as an option right off the bat is Shadow Accord. And there's some in-game, or there's some right now, some discussion about getting that changed. But every other game out there has this ability to go and just go and play, to go work for the storyteller or the plot team and go learn the system that way. I'm a big fan of the game being designed for the player, not the game being designed for the staff. It's like a 60-40 percentage, so I'm not gigantically on one side as opposed to the other. But if that's what your thing is, because I know a lot of people, they just want to go and help. They're not really worried about their character, but they want to participate. Or
in my case, before COVID hit, I was going to check out immersive LARPs for the first time. In my case, I was looking at ones that had an NPC system, because it's not that I didn't want to jump in, but I kind of wanted to see the game in action without making some mistakes on my personal character.
Nah, see, that's where that specifically, I'm like, no, go and make those mistakes. Those mistakes are some things you're going to remember for the rest of your life as this character, and very soon after. Having played a character for the last 15 years in one game at Shadow Accord, I continually put my foot in my mouth. It's going to happen. Just jump into that deep end and have some fun with it. Nobody should be lambasting. Nobody should be roasting you over some of the simpler mistakes. Yeah, we all make mistakes, and we all kind of just make a fool of ourselves once in a while. But we're also dressing up in elf ears and silly clothing and throwing beanbags at each other, yelling fireball. It's going to be okay. But if you do want to go and help out the organization that way, go for it. It's a really good way of seeing it. I prefer going the other way, seeing it how it's for the player. But there's nothing wrong with going the other way as well.
That's really good advice, and thanks for giving it. And the second question we had come in, also for somebody who wanted to remain anonymous, was, what about if I want to put on steel armor and hit people with steel swords? And I'm going to go ahead and answer that question, because wanting to stay within the scope of this episode, we actually are going to be talking about live steel fighting, SCA, and the reenactment side of things on a future episode. We have knights and combatants from those games. So
I can only talk about a little bit of that. I've only done it once or twice. So I'm that's not for me.
So while we could talk about it, please tune in. We'll make sure the synopsis is out before that episode, but we have a number of people from SCA and those live steals for that episode. We will be talking about kind of there's a lot of different, you can get nuanced death metal and different types of LARPs, and it gets really nuanced, but for the sake of most outsiders' perspectives, we will be covering the third type, which is the what I would call the more reenactment heavy fighting type, on a future episode of
I will add two things to that, actually. If that person wants to join into a LARP wearing steel, real armor, go for it.
Yeah, they definitely can. But
that would be awesome. Also, don't use aluminum or titanium. You'll love yourself in about 5 to 10 years.
Because the question specifically mentioned steel swords, I figured they were meaning more that type. But thank you so much for joining us. I don't see any other questions coming through. So if you have any quick parting thoughts, please share them with us. But again, this is Killian. Killian didn't have any socials to really share, but and since Killian have social share, I went ahead and put it on the screen again. LARPing.org is going to be apparently your best resource if you're looking for any LARP. Has an atlas, will help you find those areas. So if you have any other thoughts, go ahead and hit us with them there, Killian.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? If you know me online, you have any questions, like generally speaking, you know how to get a hold of me, and just ask as many questions you want. Like, I'm happy to help out getting your friends or you into in the game that you're going to be, that you want to participate in, or that you're looking for, or the style you're looking for. Generally speaking, when somebody's like, "Oh, I want to go do live action role playing, what do I want to do?" I'm like, I don't tell them like, "Oh, you need to go to Amtgard, you need to go to Alliance, you need to go to Shadow Court." I'll tell them, what sort of experience do you want to have? Because certain games have better experiences. If you want to go and have like the classic D&D adventure, go to Refuge or Alliance or Nero or whatever it is in your area, because there's like a half dozen in every major city that does that. If you just want to hit people and pretend to play swords, Amtgard's fantastic. You want something that's a little bit more immersive, there's 100 different LARPs out there everywhere that has like you going up and dressing up and playing your character. Reach out.
Right.
Simple Google searches are going to do you a world of favor.
And for those of you who are with us live, Killian's name over on the Discord server, which there's a link to in chat, is Killian. So if you have any like more one-on-one questions, you can definitely hit them up there. With that though, thank you again for joining us. Killian's going to be a fairly regular person based on their encyclopedic knowledge of topics, so you can expect to hear them on the podcast again in the future. Thank you again for joining us.
You're absolutely welcome.
Killian.
Thank you for
so you have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so that was Killian. What I'm going to do now is we're going to take a brief intermission while we get set up for talking with Davrai and Kimjin about the grind at Amtgard, about their paths, running events in the case of Davrai, bardic things, and everything in between, fighting and all the things they do, and really kind of getting more in detail about what Amtgard has to offer in terms of moving towards masterhood. We talked about it with Killian a little bit, where at Amtgard has a really robust recognition system and award system, and we're going to be talking with two people about that. In the interim, I'm going to get a video pulled up from Belnorn, who's actually in watching the show right now. Belnorn on their YouTube, which I'll post a link to in chat, has a lot of good videos from Amtgard. So while we take our intermission, I'm going to play a clip from that once I get it pulled up, so that you guys can kind of get a look at what we can't do right now thanks to the pandemic. And Unam, thank you for loving the circlet. It's actually Heldris Juicebox Hero TV on Twitch's circlet. I stole it because I wanted something around my head. Just 1 second. There it is. All right. I had to scan a couple because some of the ones I was going to show you were from a Masquerade Ball, and I realized that was DMCA. So let's go ahead. I'll put this on for just a few minutes, and we will be back with Kimjin and Davrai.
So it's kind of like a quest, and they are cleansing relics.
Satyr, a skeleton, a frostbite, something else walking down. Like a bad joke.
Watch the other side! You've got monsters circling around! Wait. Lancing 15. How much armor? 3 points short. I need to be touched. Man, and slow. That's not a
Brother!
that is not a
Brother!
Oh, we have hit well. Break it. We have hit well. Something coming in. The strength of the ether is mine to evoke. The strength of the ether is mine to evoke. The strength of the ether is mine to evoke. Oh, that's okay. But we invest is mine. I was
Great. Unfrozen. Are you by yourself?
The combat is kind of sporadic. So they've cleansed that set of relics. The healer is playing a priest that can cleanse the relics faster than the players. And they're escorting him.
I enchant thee with the blessing against rules. I enchant thee with the blessing against rules. I enchant thee with the blessing against rules. Your first uncle shall be adored. Yes. Oh, go on and fight. For the priest. Thank you.
Careful, man. Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Swift, the white light of healing and
Scout
field
on
thee.
sky. Cleansing 1. Cleansing 2. Cleansing 3. Cleansing 4. Cleansing 5. Take it. Cleansing 6. Cleansing 7. Cleansing 8. Cleansing 9. Cleansing 10. Cleansing 11. Cleansing 12. Cleansing 13. Cleansing 14. Cleansing 15. Immune to death! Cleansing 6. Oh no! I have been slain!
Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Renegade, 30 count for you. 30 count high.
Strength eaters, mighty bugs, strength eaters, mighty bugs, strength eaters, mighty bugs.
Who's alive?
Obey it. Get the tree.
No! Go forward! Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Swift, the white light of healing and field thee. Strength eaters, mighty bugs, strength eaters, mighty bugs, strength eaters, mighty bugs.
Not a good situation, ready?
No, it's not. Obey it!
I'm dead. I got some.
Yeah!
What's up, man?
Stun.
Welcome back. Thank you for sticking through that brief intermission that we had. Sort of playing again. Just 1 second. That was, for those of you watching, that was from a monster quest here in the Pacific Northwest, in the Portland area. So that's kind of what a quest in Amtgard looks like. I'm now popping over to the room with Kimjin and DeVry, but just give me a moment, Kimjin and DeVry, because I need to, once again, I Discord popped you guys out of pop-out mode, and so I need to make sure that, there we go, now you're back. Now people can see you. So, welcoming now to the podcast is DeVry, if you can give a little wave. DeVry is from Greenwood Keep, I believe, still. Greenwood Keep is in Olympia, Washington. I'll let them kind of share more of their stories as we get into it. And then on the right, we have Kimjin. Kimjin actually hails from which land do you hail from? I know you're from the Kingdom of Viridian Outlands, which is in eastern Washington.
I'm with Stormhaven.
Still in Stormhaven. Okay, I forgot to double check beforehand. So Kimjin joins us from Kingdom of Viridian Outlands, Stormhaven, which is Spokane, Washington. DeVry joins us from the Kingdom of the Northern Lights, from the land of Greenwood Keep, which is in Olympia, Lacey, Washington. So what we have is we have lands, we have chapters. So starting with DeVry, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of a couple of your accolades, and kind of introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, I'm DeVry. I've been playing Amtgard for something like I think 18 years. Quite a long time, actually. I started when I was 14. I'm 32, so whatever that is. I have always been interested in fantasy and sports. So I wrestled and played football in high school. And I've always liked like Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy novels and stuff like that. So like Amtgard kind of gets to meld those two things for me. I am a defender of the Northern Lights, which means I was recognized as being a high-level champion of the kingdom. Champion, for those who don't know what Amtgard is, don't know about it, is the officer who is in charge of safety on the field as well as running games when there's nothing else planned. And in our kingdom, culturally, most of the monarchs give champions pretty free reign on what games they play, unless there's something that specifically needs to be scheduled. So I'm a defender of the Northern Lights. I have 8 warriors and 8 smiths, and warriors are the latter award for tournament prowess, tournament combat, and then smiths are the awards for both running battle games and events. And I've mostly focused on battle game aspect.
Yeah, and just you explain that before we get to Kim Jin. Yeah, so just kind of refresher or for people who are new to Tavern Talks. In Amtgard, we have a ladder-based award system, so it goes from none when you start to 10. Once you have 10, you're qualified to possibly receive mastery. Mastery says that you are a master of that field, and you have to be a master of a field to be eligible for knighthood. And knighthood takes a look at not just your mastery, but also things like virtues and teaching and things like that. So the 4 paths we have, just so people have the kind of vernacular and terminologies, we have the flame path, which is service based, which Smith is part of, like DeVry said, for running events. We have the sword path, which is for tournament, one-on-one combat of prowess, no abilities, no armor, just straight one-on-one combat. We have the crown path, which is based on serving offices, of which DeVry mentioned they'd been a champion, and that's who runs all of like the battle games and things like that. And then like a role play court scenario, they're the ones who protects the monarch. And then we also have the serpent path, and the serpent path is for people who are artisans, whether it be crafting things or performing things, writing things like that. So DeVry having high-level warriors and high-level smiths puts them on watch list, so the knights are kind of watching them. The monarchy is watching them as they get those last couple levels, and really they've built their career over a decade in the game on event running, game design, and that kind of combat of prowess. And so now that we've kind of got the vernacular, I'll turn it over to Kim Jin to kind of talk about, joining Amtgard and their accolades and where they're kind of at in the game.
Hey, what's up? So I'm Kim Jin, as you heard, Jong, the absolute illest, Bard of Bards, voice of Black Spire et al. That's Laddie Boy. He's hanging out. He's being cute.
We're also joined by Laddie Boy.
Oh, there he is. This is Laddie Boy. He's adorable. I started the game about 5 years ago. I think 6 years ago in a month, but then, Corona doesn't even count because we haven't played the game in like a year. So, but so I played the game for about 5 years. I started in Tri-Cities. I got into it from shout out Kelju to Mildren and Orion. They were my childhood best friend's older sister and boyfriend. And when we became friends, I started hanging out with them more. They introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons and anime and all kinds of nerdy shit, and all the good stuff, all the fun. And we kind of were doing that for a long time. We did Magic for a long time, and then a friend of theirs moved into town for like a year and tried to get us to start it up. And so we said, let's give it a shot. And he ended up moving away, and now we have the Viridian, or the Kingdom of Land. I can't talk. The land of VOT, Valley of the Trident down there in Tri-Cities. We started that up ourselves and went to our first event, fell in love with it. Haven't missed one since.
Awesome. And just make sure that people know like where you're kind of close when we're talking about paths. Kimjin has 9 orders of the dragon, and they do a variety of arts, but his main focus artistically has been on the bardic arts. So poetry, the things we recite when we give people their awards, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's we're kind of covering a lot of paths here. And both of you have served at least at some level in a political office, be it land or kingdom level or principality level before VO was a kingdom.
Right.
So I feel like the panel here, like between both of them, and there's a lot of overlap. Like no one in Amtgard is like a solely focused person. I feel like everybody, while you might only master one path or 2 paths, everybody's kind of a little bit of a renaissance person, a little bit of a jack of all trades. So starting though with DeVry, Amtgard in the last decade has gone through at least 2 major rules additions. So I'm not going to really need to talk about the differences of the rule sets. How has that posed, as somebody whose focus is on game design, how has that like been kind of moving up the path, moving from like one rules addition to another, and then being so vastly different? And for those of you who don't play Amtgard, the move from version 7 of Amtgard to version 8 is very similar to the move of D&D 3.5 to D&D like 4th or 5th edition. Like it's the same game spiritually, but the rules are vastly different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think from both a player perspective and a game designer's perspective, I think that V8 is superior to V7. Particularly, it's superior to V6, which is what I started in. V8 focuses a lot more on keeping the game running. Like, so in older versions, you'd take an ice ball. When I started, ice ball was 5 minutes. You'd be frozen for 5 minutes, or a 300 count. And then in V7, it dropped to 150 because people were already half counting their magic. People were already not, playing by the rules in V6 because it was too long, so they were dropping the time. Well, that continued, and now an ice ball is 60 seconds. And for a bit, it was pretty common that you'd still get half count magic, but that's we realized then that at a certain point, then magic's pretty useless, and so at least locally in the Northern Lights, that's not such a big deal.
So you would say, just to kind of rephrase it, the big difference as a game runner as you've moved through the editions is that the gameplay has gotten faster, more fast paced, but also as a game designer, it's provided you more freedom in the design of games.
To an extent, yes, and I think one of the biggest things that they got rid of that allowed game designers to kind of have more free reign is they got rid of lives. Basically, you don't have a limited number of lives anymore unless you design that specifically in the game. In older versions, you'd have like 5 lives or 4 lives, and it would vary by classes. And so every game, regardless of how you wanted it to run, would turn into basically a shatter battle. A shatter battle is where you just try to kill everybody off, and if there's nobody left, you win. So with V8, with that not being a core mechanic, and that being more optional. Like you could do that. You could have everybody have a limited number of lives or whatever.
Yeah. So
That just opens it up.
so for my fellow WoW nerds, um, old games to me feel more like when you're playing World PvP or Altric Valley in WoW, and new battle games feel more like I'm doing like arena or like fast-paced battlegrounds. That's kind of the pacing changes to me. Kind of switching gears a little bit over to Kimjin. The arts and sciences, like there's many ways to go up. Like anything that is a craft or artistic that falls within kind of the fantasy realm is something that can eventually get you to master it. However, there's garbing, which has been essentially like making the tunics and the breeches and the clothing we wear. And there's, while not all the way to the master game roadmap, there's kind of more of a roadmap. For you, Kimjin, you've been coming up in the bardic arts, which has traditionally been either overlooked or never really been evolved by someone to the point. What's it been like coming up in a field, the arts and sciences fields, with this thing that doesn't have as much of a roadmap as, say, garb or armor?
It's definitely a very unique experience, you know. It wasn't something I had ever thought of. I was for the longest time going for the sword path myself, and you know, it's still a goal. I got arthritis in my hands, so it's a goal. But like, you know, it's one of those things that I love, and it was what I was doing for a very long time, and then I was working in service and stuff like that, and my roses were getting up, and I was like, oh wow, maybe that would be something, you know, 10, 20 years down the road that could eventually get there, just because I like to help out where I can. And then you know, I did a little bit of political stuff, and you know, I was princess for a time, long live. Um, and that was hard. That was really difficult. And I was like, you know, maybe that's not the path. But I had never really thought to even do crafting, right? Because I'm not or the serpent, that is, because I do some small things like macrame belts and such, but I don't foresee myself taking the time to learn chainmail or become a renowned tailor or anything like that, like some of these people around. And when it kind of came apparent to me, it was just in a couple awards I had given for things that were old. Somebody had gotten in office and were like, "Hey, we should award Kimjin for these things. He's this Paragon bard. He's been a bard for years, and he actually, you know, has these poems that he has performed." And I don't know if they were just going through the book and realized that it was something that was possible to be awarded for it or what. And so it kind of just came out of left field on me. Um, and then I helped with some Paragon scrolls and stuff like that, and ended up getting more awards. And I was like, you know, maybe this could be something, right? And I was like, maybe this could be my own carving of a path, something that would be fun for me to do. And now I'm the as you've coined me, the voice of Blackspire, Bard of Bards, and so I get people all over asking me to add and help on scrolls or quests or anything like that, and I love it. I love getting to help make the role play or a special moment for anybody more special, right? But for the actual getting of the award, you know, working, progressing, it's a hard thing that something that I love doing. I love writing. I think I'm very good at it. It doesn't take me very long. I have a great time with it, and I have a good passion for it when we can actually play the game. Um, but after doing, you know, so many, it's hard to know, okay, what do I do next? How do I progress, right? Because our systems are a 1 through 10 system. It's not 10 of one award. It's 10 progressing awards. And so that's honestly been a hard part of it, is like how to move it forward, how to one up myself.
And that's actually a really good thing. I'm glad you said that, because it actually brings us right into the next subject. And just again, as vernacular comes up, I want to make sure that everybody has it in case they don't participate in Amtgard at this point and are listening to this. So when Kim Jin mentioned Paragon scrolls, so when people get certain honors, so a Paragon is somebody who has mastered the play of a specific class in the game, or a Duke is somebody who has served as monarch and did a great job. So we do these ceremonies, and part of that is words, and that's why I dubbed Kimjin the Bard of Bards, because they came up with a lot of words when I was the Princex of Blackspire, which oversees kind of the arts and sciences and a lot of the awards. But the big thing that's kind of going to move us to the next subject, I think, is, you know, while there are master smiths, people who've come up on battle game design, the rules are ever changing, and even people who've done things like garb techniques are ever changing. Like, what was a master in 96 quality item is not going to be the same now in 2020 going forward, because everybody evolves it. And in Kimjin's case, they're evolving something that is kind of more of a fresh path. So we'll go back over to DeVry, kind of talk about your journey, like not from the very beginning of Amtgard to 9, but from the point you got to a point where, like, and it could be from the start if you had this goal from the start, from where you were like, I think I'm going to work towards, even if it's not in the field you have the most awards in, where you had that thought, I want to become a master, till now. Kind of give a kind of a summary of that journey.
Okay, I specifically know what spurred me to actually start working on and thinking about fighting. I always enjoyed the fighting in Amtgard, but my main focus from high school to about 25 was wrestling, and then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. And I got to 5-2 as an amateur fighter, and then life kind of hit me, and I lost a job, and ended up, I was sleeping in a shed, got a job, and decided this was a caregiving job for mentally disabled folk. And I ended up gaining a lot of weight through both just being sedentary and eating like I was working really hard again, because I worked a job for a couple months where I was burning a lot of calories, and I just kept eating like crap, gained a ton of weight, and then so sometime around when I was 26 and a half, like, I was going out to Amtgard a bit, but I was working graveyard, so I wasn't really in the best mental space or physical shape. And somebody posted hey, who do you think the top 10 fighters are in the Northern Lights? And Show made a list excluding all the warlords and knights, I think, mainly to not ruffle feathers. He didn't want to have to order those people in an order. So, which basically, I think it was like, that would have been like, excluding them, that would have basically top 15 in the kingdom at that point. If you just excluded the knights and put them at the top into any order, or the warlords. And I wasn't on that list. And I was really annoyed, because at that point I'd been playing for 12 years, and I'm like, I'm not even in the top 15. And so that really made me buckle down and start thinking about fighting. And that was the biggest change for me, because I was fighting 1 to 2 days a week. And as soon as I could get people to show up and come to practices, I was fighting, 2 to 4 days a week, and actually thinking about fighting rather than just going out and swinging blindly.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we want to keep rolling. So for you to say the big catalyst for you was basically being somebody who comes from like a competitive background, when you talk about wrestling and MMA, was seeing yourself not on a list, and that kind of gave you the kicker to be like, no, I'm going to start pushing myself, because if a list like this comes out again, I want to see my name.
Yeah. I was very much not happy with how that list shook out. And granted, it was just one guy,
right?
It
was just that sentiment. And then I want to say, for people in chat that are people who might just be listening, I mentioned Masterhood, unique to Master of the Warrior Path, of the Fighting Path. We call that a Warlord, and that's because we also have a class called a Warrior. And while we call them Paragons now, back in the day, they used to be called, I could be a Master Healer or a Master Warrior. So to separate, I'm a Master of this class from I am a Master of tournament one-on-one fighting, we call Masters of Tournament Fighting Warlords. And then shift over to Kimjin. What was the be it day one, seeing someone else. You talked a lot about like how you evolved your path, but what was the like the catalyst for you that made you go from, again, because you can play this game for, I know people have played for 2 decades and they never want to be a master, and that's perfectly fine. You can play week to week for your whole time playing and never want to be a master, kind of like playing a game that has a ranking system. You can play Street Fighter and never want to be an Evo class like Street Fighter player. What for you
Right.
was the catalyst to go, I actually think I want to go for master it. I want to try to become a master of a field.
Well, so I don't want to diverge too much from the ladder awards and stuff like that, but really it was Paragon for me. I wanted to be a Paragon Bard because I was like, okay, I love this class. This is super fun. I'm having a great time with it, and I saw Miller Time just out there crushing it my first year playing the game, and I was like, this is a goal. And I'm somebody who needs goals. I like to platinum most video games I play, and as soon as I run out of goals, I stop playing the game. So a game like Call of Duty or something like that can only interest me for so long because I don't have a goal. And so I always look for goals that then continue, just something for me to do. Whether right, it'd be Master Paragon, Master Paragon Peasant, Paragon Bard, going for these awards right now, going for Sword at the time, or just going for personal goals that I give myself. Um, and so the first belt I wanted to go for was Warrior because I wanted to fight, I wanted to be good, and I wanted people to know I was good because I was 16. Whack.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm also somebody who's always, I need to have a goal. And just for people listening who like, obviously both the people we have on now, and it's is a common thread, not through everybody by any means, but a lot of people is fighting. It's because having that initial goal be to master your class, become a paragon of a class like Kim Jin, or just seeing fighters. Like a lot of people are drawn to games like Call of Duty that Kim Jin mentioned for that. So you see fighting, the first thing you usually do for many people is fighting. So a lot of people, I think, start their aspirations with fighting, and it seems like both of
Mhm.
you did as well. So what I want to go to next is, obviously you're still blazing past, like DeVry, you mentioned you have 2 8s on a 10 ladder system and each one's harder than the last. Kim Jin's at 9 in a path. Um, so what I want to kind of talk about is like, obviously you're not quite at a master level yet, but you've been through the phases of I want to eventually be a master to I'm getting awards. And along the way, we all hit plateaus, ebbs and flows with our own motivations. So can you talk about some of the challenges you faced just getting to where you are now from that point you mentioned where you decided I'm going to strive for mastery?
You want to take it right? You want me?
Now we can start with go either way with however who wants to go first.
Go ahead, Kim Jin.
Well, I think one that anybody can attest to is Corona. It's hard to want to move on with Amtgard goals when there's no Amtgard, um, and not to get into any of it, but there's drama that has gone on with the game while we can't even play the game and have the fun parts and see our
So
friends.
actually, sorry to cut you off. If we just talk about ebbs and flows, I should have clarified pre-corona. That our next conversation point, don't worry, is going to be
Oh.
how we survive during corona with these things. So if let's actually, up until March of this year, let's talk about the
Okay.
journey.
Yeah, cool. Well then for that, I took a break from the game. I normally take breaks in the winter because I do a lot of snowboarding and I work for UPS, which is we hit peak right after Thanksgiving and stuff goes crazy and I work 14-hour days. And so I put a lot of my focus into that. I do a lot less fighting. The cold makes my hands hurt, so I fight even less for that. There's not many events, and so I always struggle with motivation. Especially being in an art for myself, a muse of being to play the game gives me the motivation to write for it, right? And so anytime though I'm not playing the game or I haven't actively been playing the game, I have issues. But when I'm really in it, saying the flows parts of the ebbs, when I'm really excited about something and events coming up, I always am writing. That's what always spurs motivation for me, or I can use writing to motivate myself for an event. I will often, like a week before the event, just start just on my own, write things, and that's just to kind of hype myself up.
Awesome. And yeah, same for you, DeVry. The kind of ebbs and flows on your path up until March
So
of this year.
for Smith, the hardest part about that is getting, especially at the upper tiers, is getting the opportunities to really prove yourself. We only have so many events, big events, in a year, and you have to be on a winning bid or have to be tapped. And a lot of that comes down to who your friends are, who's in power, and
So,
who gets the bids.
and I'm
So
going to pause right there for vernacular. So, most people probably know that from other forms of work, but yeah, in most kingdoms, I believe all three of our kingdoms, the major events, there's between 2 and 4 a year, and it's fully selected by the monarchy, which are, or in some kingdoms, the board of directors, but it's still a pool of people between like 4 and 8 people actually making that selection based on every different team or person who submitted a bid. Sorry to interrupt you. Continue on, DeVry.
yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the hardest things. And then so as a smith, like you got to go bigger and better. And I live in an apartment, so I don't have a lot of space to store equipment. So like if I want to build a cool castle or something, I've got nowhere to store it. So I've got the ability. I work in construction. I know how to do stuff, but I don't have anywhere to store it. So those are my biggest obstacles, I think, for the Smith path. For the sword path, so at Greenwood Keep, I've got Colton. He's a warlord and a sword knight, good dude. But
He
he
was
doesn't
actually
come
on
out.
the first podcast we had. So if anybody goes back and watches that podcast, we actually talked extensively with Colton.
But he doesn't always come out every week. And he's got a family. He's living his life. He doesn't have time always to do side training with me or anything. So getting training partners is hard on the sword path. Like finding somebody of a close skill level is really difficult. I have to drive an hour and a half on a weeknight past I-5 or down to Longview to find people. Not past I-5, but past Fort Lewis, or
sometimes hours just to.
Yeah. It's just to find somebody to fight if I want to get somebody during the week. So generally to combat that, I will play both Saturday, Sunday. I usually go up to Inland Ocean because that's got a fairly decent,
which is
high
Seattle,
percentage.
Washington.
Yeah, they've got a pretty decent pool of fighters that even if their best aren't out, they're usually got some good guys out. And then the other way I combat that, the big fish, small pond syndrome, is I've been going to more national level events. Like I went to Spring War in Texas right before the Corona shutdown, which may have been a little reckless, but it was a lot of fun. And I've been hitting SKBC every year for the last few years. Sword Night Boot Camp. It's a teaching event, which is one of the big revolutions in the last 15, 20 years in Amtgard as far as the fighting culture goes.
It gathers fighters from not just our game, but similar games like Bell and Dag, and basically all these top fighters come together, and you can take classes and learn from them. So it's like a huge, basically a sports training camp, basically.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Those were my main, like that, and just trying to specifically work on stuff rather than kind of just go through the motions, like being mindful about my time on the field and my training.
Yeah. So to kind of surmise, like between both Kimjin and DeVry, like it depends on your path, but there's always going to be things from getting event bids to having the proper motivation to, in the case of fighting, like it's like fighting even in other sports that are fighting sports, you have to find training partners, go through training camps and the like. Next, I think I really want to I already mentioned we're getting to next, is how do you stay if you do, because some people are just kind of waiting for things to go, how do you find the ability, if you do, or to stay motivated and involved, not just with your path, but the game in general, since we haven't been able to be out to the field since, in my case, down here in the Portland area, March, and in some cases, April, but it's been, we've now gone through our monarchies, the people who lead us, they are democratically elected, they serve 6-month terms, and we've actually moved into a second term. So it's been a long time since we've been able to really play it at the same level we used to. And we can go ahead and start over with Kim Jin, since I cut Kim Jin off earlier on this subject.
Oh no, you're good. So yeah, so COVID is makes it hard to play a game where we like to see our friends and be around each other, and that's super hard, at least for me, for motivation. Um, and then both of us love our sword path. I mean, you can't spar with anybody. That's makes it literally impossible. You can pell, but it's not the same. It's more of training a muscle memory than anything else. Um, but so I've been really out of it, honestly. The only Amtgard connection I have, other than my friends who live locally and that I see at work, or I'm roommates with Squish, um, is the Lions. We have a drinking chat every once in a while, and we hang out and talk and have a great time. And it's nice to have some tethering still to Amtgard with that. Those are always fun, but it always end with us just all saying that we miss Amtgard a whole bunch. Um, and then just this last election for VO, which was like a week ago, I decided that I was being too sedentary with Amtgard and just kind of staying away from it until Corona, went over or is done, and that I decided to myself that I wasn't really contributing to this game that I love right now when it needs us, and signed up for the bod. So I'll be back on that.
Awesome. And Devon?
So my motivation for Amtgard's pretty low. Like, I've had some swords that I've needed to rebuild for a while, but I think since March I fought with foam like maybe 5 times total. Thurston County until recently was doing really good with coronavirus, so I got a couple short days where I'd spar with people. But so I kind of focused on some other goals since it's hard to get people to swing foam. I don't live with anybody who's got an immunocompromised or anything like that, so I've been doing jujitsu and kickboxing and stuff as responsibly as I can. That might be coming to an end soon. But I've also tried bow herd a couple times, which is steel armored combat with blunted steel weapons, like you and Killian were talking about a little bit. I've tried that a couple times, and that's a lot of fun. It's definitely something I'm going to get into when things clear up. But as far as like my connection to Amtgard, I've done some videos, I've done some training videos, I've done some videos talking about being champion and running games and stuff like that. And then I've done like the Lions chat. I've been like invited into that a couple times. I've joined Colton in Colton's Corner a couple times, just talking with people. I'm also on the BOD. Some stuff came up last month that kind of threw me off, and I need to catch up on some stuff. I'm the secretary for the BOD, and I need to, that reminds me.
So in both your cases, you mentioned some similar things, whether it be BOD or offices and chats. Basically, the biggest things that's helped you stay connected have been chats with groups that you're part of or that people are hosting, and also finding like ways to serve in like some form of office capacity. So different things to keep your some connection to the game.
Yeah.
And just basically the next thing I want to make sure we get to in the podcast is advice. So sticking with we'll start with COVID, and then the next one will be like once we're out of COVID. But during COVID, like you've mentioned the things you do, is there any additional advice either of you might have for people who are struggling to maintain connections or things like that?
So I've played a little bit of Among Us with some Amtgarders, and it's a cheap or free game to play depending on what platform you play on, and it's cross-platform, so that's an easy way to just have an activity together that you're not just sitting around talking about how sad you are. You're doing something together. So finding something easy and cheap to do with a group of your friends, be they Amtgard or not, is just great. Um, uh, Focus on other goals. Focus on things that might help you when you get to the field. If you can find the motivation to craft some cool armor, craft some cool garb. So when you're going out, you're looking fresh, you're ready to go. Focus on your physical health. COVID is not great for those of us who are overweight, and so if you can, use it as motivation to, feel a little healthier, feel a little bit better about yourself, then do that. I've lost quite a bit of weight during COVID. A lot of that's just not eating out and sticking to a diet, and not having excuses to go off of it.
Yeah, there was actually a lot of comments in chat earlier for those who are just listening about how good DeVry's looking with their weight loss. So
Yeah.
And Kim Jin, do you have any advice, or pretty much the same thing that DeVry's saying there?
No, I think it's pretty similar. I wanted to mention just because I did hear Killian's part and stuff like that. One thing that we haven't really that hasn't been mentioned, and maybe you guys have before, but about these LARPs is it's a big family. These are a lot of these people are friends for life that I love very dearly, and it has been really hard on I'm sure most of us, 99% of us, with COVID, not being able to see these people that maybe you only get to see them 3 times a year, but it's a lot better than zero. And so if you are needing people, there's quite a few different Discords. There's, people post on the Kingdom page and make challenges all the time. Just get a hold of whatever your monarchy is too. Maybe do it if you want some crafting motivation. Maybe try to host a crafting contest. Get in touch with your regent, something like that. But whatever you can, it's hard. COVID's not great.
Just a quick shout out for if you are interested in having various places to talk about it. While we have a lot of rooms, we do have a LARP section on my Discord as well. But there is, like Kim just said, there's a lot of resources out there. And I also I want to give another shout to what DeVry said, finding other ways to continue. Based on what Kim just said, we become friends kind of for life. So finding even games like Among Us that's not Amtgard but still lets you keep those connections is really important. And then to my own end of that question, I started up a Twitch podcast because I wanted to still be doing things and talking about Amtgard. So, but moving to in the future, once we can return to Amtgard, and and the motive and the COVID reason for not being able to focus on striving for Paragon Hood or Mastery or things like that is gone. From your own experiences, what sort of things help you stay? And I know you've both touched on it in other questions, but what sort of things would you give as advice to people who might be, say, stuck at a certain level and not sure where to go, or looking for an innovation? Just any advice for a world once we return from COVID.
All right, so sword path. If you feel you're on a plateau, or you feel that you don't know where to go next, there's an article, I don't know if you can still find it, I don't think the website's still there, about being highly, not self-critical, you shouldn't be mean to yourself, but being very honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you're bad at. You need to just realize, okay, my feet are a little slow. Well, can I fix that? Well, I can jump rope. I can do this. I can do that. I can do sports agility drills, things like that to make your feet better. And then also just having conscious, the biggest thing that helped me was being conscious of the mechanics of the game. So if I throw a high cross, well, I know that I'm exposing this, this, and this. If I throw a backhanded flat wrap, I know I'm exposing this, this, and this. If I throw out. If I throw inside, they throw outside, I block and I return, right? Just understanding these little nuances. There's a lot of people who can help you with that, but that's one of the biggest thing is thinking about it beyond, having a plan and executing the plan and then reassessing. For Smith stuff, you gotta start volunteering. Like if you're wanting to get into Smith, hey, can I help you run this game? Hey, I want to run a game. Can I run a game? Most of the time, monarchs or champions are glad to not have to run a game, to not have to be in charge. So I would bring it up to the champion or the monarch, whoever's in charge of your scheduling for your local park. Bring it up to them ahead of time, like, hey, I want to run a game next week. Is there anything, that would stop that? Oh, well, we got a quest. It's going to take 4 hours. So you want to make sure that there's time for what you want to do, but you also need to just step up and volunteer. The same thing can be said for any other of the service paths. Rose, to an extent, Lion, although Lion is the leadership path, so volunteering to help might not get you there, but it'll get you the doors and the social capital in order to then have people be willing to help you. So,
Yeah, just to touch on both those before we move over to Kim Jin. I think they're both great pieces of advice. I think they're not even necessarily needing to be specific to Smith or to fighting. I think with fighting, the idea of just like thinking about incremental advancement, and just I'll liken that to even Twitch streaming. Like the two big things is one, you just have to jump in, volunteer, talk to other people who've done it before you, and then you have to be willing to be self-critical, not mean to yourself, but just like what small change can I make and make those incremental kind of adjustments. And so that's a lot of what I heard from DeVry's advice. Do you have anything else to add or different advice there, Kim Jin?
I was kind of incremental is a really good term. I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I was mentioning me and DeVry both are backpacker outdoorsy guys. We like hiking and stuff like that. And I remember being 16, climbing out of the Grand Canyon, and I was just kept telling myself I just got to make it to that tree, and then I just got to make it to that rock, and then I just got to make it to that, and then 8 hours later you're up and out of the canyon, right? And it really is just you can't just look at the end goal. You have to break it down into pieces. You have to work on what you can work on. And sometimes, and this isn't for everyone, but I will say sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is a break. Sometimes just grinding your face against something so hard can only hurt you. And I think it's the really, really difficult to recognize that. And I think the best way to recognize that is to surround yourself with people who understand who you are, and they need to recognize that for you at some point, that you are almost hurting yourself in your as you push your goals forward. Not to demotivate anybody, of course, but it's just something to be aware of, that burnout is what's gonna hurt your path more than time itself.
In 25 years of playing the game, I would say the biggest killer of people's dreams and aspirations is burnout. So, in addition to like you kind of also said, yeah, incremental is important, but yeah, your mental health, I think, is something that people don't always talk about. So I'm glad you brought that up. And burnout is part of your mental health. It's knowing when, or having the people around you to let you know when, like, you don't lose. Like, yes, fighting might elevate a bit higher. Yes, someone else might get an event bid, but you don't lose all the work you've put in just because you need to take a step back and treat your mental health, because that happens everywhere in life. If you push too hard and you burn out, then you're never going to go forward. Whereas if you take the time to take care of your mental health and make sure you're not burning out, or maybe just focus on something else, or take a step back and just enjoy something else within the game where you're still involved with the game, but not pushing yourself so hard. Sometimes, at least in my experiences, in goals I've had, even now, post being a knight, I've come back to them with that fresh, like, rested, I'm not burnt out anymore. And all of a sudden the progress is there because I was pushing so hard against the wall. I never took a step back to go, oh, there's a door right over there.
Right.
So I have something to actually add about goals in general, and this is not just advice for Amtgard or LARP or anything else. your goals should be measurable and achievable. And your goals should be broken down into steps. Just having I want to be a sword knight someday, or I want to own a business someday, right? Like, well, you can't just say that's your goal and not know any way to how to approach it. If you want to be a sword knight, well, your first step would be get a sword, or a boffer, and then find somebody to practice with, find your local park, etc. Each of these is an incremental step, and like Kim Jin was saying, you look at the rock and you go, okay, well, I got to get to that rock, and then I got to get to that tree, and so on and so forth. And if you look at those as those smaller steps, it's going to be easier for you to see your progress. Sometimes, especially when you're hitting plateaus, you feel like you're not making any progress when really you might just be like, going down a side path that's going to give you some other insight for something else. Or sometimes everybody else is just getting good too. Like the people you measure yourself against, if they're worth measuring against, they're trying to improve themselves as well. So, and that's something I think that you need to take into everyday life. Something that I didn't always do in everyday life. I'm trying to get better at it.
Yeah, I actually really like what you said there. And I know some of the people actually watching and listening right now are streamers who haven't done LARP, but so I'll liken it to streaming. It's actually very much the same. Like you can sit down and go, I want to be a partner who gets on Twitch, and that's going to be what I'm going to do to make a living. And you can just say that, and you can say that into the wind without ever getting there. But the real process is incremental steps, being realistic about your goals and the steps together. Like you can have your big goal, but having small step goals along the way. And also I love what you said and want to call it out a second time about not like, yes, it's okay to compare yourself to other people, but yeah, anybody who you're comparing yourself to is also striving. So it's important, back to even with burnout and breaks. It's also in what DeVry you said earlier about being self-critical. Sometimes you need to make sure those small goals are internal goals. Like I accomplished this, so I am progressing forward on this plateau. Just because so and so now is better than me in tournaments doesn't mean I didn't also progress. Like my shots are cleaner in the terms of fighting, or oh, my battle game design is a lot smoother. Doesn't just because someone else might have passed you doesn't necessarily mean you aren't still moving forward. Like you said, a side path. So I just wanted to recall out those things that both of you said, because I thought those are all really great call outs. We are kind of winding down on time. And so I just want to kind of end, like we've kind of gone over the past, the advice and all that. So really stepping back from Smiths and Warriors and Paragons and these like big goals, like we're in the middle of COVID, but like Kim Jin did mention earlier, like sometimes like when all you can do is be on Facebook groups and online, some of the drama is more highlighted than the fun part. So I like to try to end these, like last one cut out early because my internet, but I'm trying to end these on kind of a, what's a really cool thing? Like for somebody who hasn't been to Amtgard, or somebody who has been in a while, or somebody who's seen the drama and forgetting the good, what's a really cool part of Amtgard outside of the worth? Just like something that's cool about, something you enjoy about, something you miss and look forward to getting back to when COVID's over.
Oh, go ahead, Kim Jin.
Plain and simple. And I say it every time I talk to anybody about Amtgard. Anybody, they would be like, "Oh, what's the fighting like? What's the magic like? What's like?" It doesn't matter anymore. I could stop playing every aspect of the game and I would still show up to events because I want to see DeVry's face, because I want to see Uriel's face, because I love Amtgard so dearly. I mean, people saw me in Blackspire and Northern Lights driving 8 hours every other weekend for like all last summer because I wanted to go see my friends, and I tell everybody that I know hundreds of houses in Oregon, Washington, all over Canada that no matter what happened, I would have a bed to stay in because these people are my family and I miss my family.
Yeah, I think that is, so I've done some surveys in the past about Amtgard and what hooked people versus what keeps people around. And most people, what hooked them was the fighting, and then what keeps them around is their friends. You build your social networks out of this game, for good or ill. And a lot of these people that I play with are really good friends of mine. And unfortunately, fortunately, I would never know them for any other reason other than Amtgard. We don't travel in the same circles. As far as like the actual game, what I'm going to miss, like what I'm going to look forward to most is using my polearm and hearing people complain. It really does good for my soul.
Yeah. Yeah, family, definitely seeing people, that's same for me too. We do have about 5 minutes left. I haven't seen any questions come through Discord or the chat, but if anybody does have any questions for either Kimjin or DeVry, go ahead and post them in chat. While I wait to see if we have any questions, I want to make sure I take the time to thank both DeVry and Kimjin. Thank you both for coming here, being part of the show, the podcast, talking about Amtgard. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your lives to do this and be here today. And if either of you have any social media you want to shout out, you said before show you really didn't, you can go ahead and shout it out. Otherwise, you can definitely find them in the respective and other kingdom groups and stuff. For those of you who play Amtgard, they're both pretty prolific players who are both vocal enough that they're easy enough to track down if you want to hit them up about the game.
Kimjin, how long have you been playing?
Since December 15th, 2014.
I could have swore I must have met you your first year playing, because I could have swore you've been playing longer than that.
Actually, yeah, no, about 6 years, something like that.
I'm glad you asked Kimjin that question, because Kimjin said it at the start, and that's one of the reasons I'm trying to pick pairs for various reasons. One of the reasons I really wanted both of you to be on was you've both taken kind of unique roads, because I feel like games are ever evolving, and Kimjin's doing Bardic stuff that hasn't really been recognized before. But the other thing is, I really wanted to show like Kimjin's at 9, DeVry's at 8 in 2 fields. Some people take even longer. One's been playing about 5 years, one's been playing over 10. And so just because you've been playing a long time, or just because you just joined, like, you can always jump in. There's no, oh, I got started too late to go for my goals, or there's no, oh, I haven't been around long enough to start working on my goals. Like, I think it really shows, like, you have two very prominent people who started at very different times, and they're both like pushing the envelope in their fields. So I think it's important to make sure people know that never too late and never too early to start.
So there's a question that gets asked at Sword Night Boot Camp for people who, for warlords, and frequently it's, how long did it take you to get your belt, or your warlord? And for most of the players there, it was like 5 to 7 years. So I'm well behind where most athletic people would be to get their belt. And I think a lot of that was my focus on other athletics for a while, and then I got real fat and I'm losing weight. So
yeah, but you're still, like I said, you might be later, but you're still back in the grind. And there are people like you mentioned earlier who did the list, like Show, who like put in like decades to get there. So we do have a question, and since we're running down, we'll definitely get to the question. So this question comes from Unam. Has a question for you both. How dare you? And follow up, why are y'all so awesome? So the question for both of you is, how dare you? Why y'all so awesome? From Unam.
How dare I? It's because I can't be stopped. And why am I so awesome? Talk to my parents.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with born, bred, and raised both to dare and be.
See, he's got better words. That's
well, I mean, we did mention that they are that he's at 9 orders of the dragon for words. So anyway, thank you both again for being here and being part of it. I love you both and miss you both dearly, and I'm sure we'll talk to you both really soon. So you have a good evening. For the rest of the people, we'll be wrapping up here in a few minutes, but I want to make sure we're passing over to Belnorn, because for those of you, please stick around. We're going to be raiding over to Belnorn. also part of Amtgard. They're doing a beer tasting, and they're like getting into the kind of the weeds and the details of like actually like analyzing some beers. And I think that's really interesting. So
Hey, Uriel.
yeah.
Hypers Legion.
Everest Legion is the best fighting company in Amtgard that no one's seen yet because of COVID.
Later.
Later.
Thanks for having us.
Bye. Anyway, thank you again, everybody. I'm going to do a real quick check now to make sure that Belnorn TV is actually live because I don't want to raid a non-existent thing. I realize this window's still up, so now you're just watching me as let me get rid of that for y'all. Thank you, everybody, though, for being here with us. Before I do that, I want to make sure, because I couldn't call it out during the chat itself, I want to thank Amelane82 for following, Pekin Pie for following, Steve for 20 gifted a sub earlier, to Jose UK 86. Thank you so much for that gifted. Welcome to the Locktopus Party, Jose UK 86. Al my bumfoff, thank you so much for the Prime subscription. Think you could choose anyone for that. You only get one a month and you use it. I mean, thank you so much. And thank you, Valor Doharis, for the follow. Thank you, each and every one of you, for tuning in to this. We are going to do another one of these Tavern Talks next week. We don't have our third guest secured quite yet, but two of our guests are going to be Oramus, the current sitting king of the Kingdom of Northern Lights, also somebody who is at 9 Orders of the Warrior. And we're also going to have Big Mac Elkhart, who, while also has 9 Orders of the Warrior, so two people really focused on fighting, is really one of the more Renaissance men of our games. Very well versed and coming up in arts and sciences, crafting, and chainmail. Coming up, has always been a service. So we're going to be talking to a very prolific and very important member of the Kingdom of Blackspire down here in Oregon. So both Oramus and Big Mac are going to be our guests next week. So please tune in. They're both amazing people, and we're going to have another amazing Tavern Talk with them. So now I will double check to make sure that Belnorn is live, and we will go over and we'll learn about beer. Dad, where are you? Are you live? All right, Belnorn TV is in fact live, so please say hello as we raid in to Belnorn TV here in just 10 seconds. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. Hope to see you on a future stream, but if nothing else, hope that you catch another Tavern Talk.
Like only 2 other people know I like gnomes, and I like it being mysterious. So maybe someone will get the gnome story out of me. Great, Octavian, you're rating with 17 people. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Owen, thank you for throwing the subscribe 3 months in a row. That's amazing. Thank you. I really appreciate that. You've been very supportive. Oh no, the chat is black in the corner. Anyways, yeah, how was your stream? I was able to catch most of it, but I was talking with other people, so they would talk over it, so I didn't get to catch as much of it as like. I mostly caught the last 40 minutes with DeVry and Kim Jim. Oh, the Dorito chips! Oh, the cheers! I love it. Thank you. So I figured we'd be getting into the beers here. Now that you're all here, might as well get into the beers.